Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. First, I want to say thank you so much to the new subscribers and thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about NXIVM and Keith Raniere, and we're going to call it NXIVM and Keith Raniere, the Cult of Personality. And it's going to be a multi-episode series so that I don't wear you out, because this is going to be a long one. Let me do my caveat. This video is only my opinion, but it's formed from many sources. It's formed from the documentary called The Vow on HBO Max. It's formed by the Starz documentary called Seduced, by publicly available sources wherein the different parties have given interviews or made statements, information that's on the social media, and NXIVM on Trial podcast, as well as the criminal and the civil case transcripts and things that have been released. All right, so I'm still plowing my way through the criminal trial transcripts. Yeah, it is quite intense, and as always, the viewers are always encouraged to do their own research and to form their own opinions, and to even leave them in my comment section below. So in my opinion, overall, okay, I think that Raniere is the villain of the piece. And I like to sometimes liken certain villains to Dracula. And in my mind, Raniere's the Dracula. And he picks these victims, witting or unwitting, or unwilling even, and he makes them vampires. And then they go from a victim to being then perhaps an abuser by creating more vampires. And it's up to the court to decide the culpability of the other folks. Even Raniere, who's now been deemed guilty. He is now serving 120 years in prison. But yet some of the other followers are still awaiting sentencing. Their guilt has been determined, but they're awaiting sentencing, some of them. So that's a reason I'm still doing this, because it's still an ongoing issue. I think Raniere's the villain of the piece. You may feel personally that there's more culpability in some of the victims who then went on, and I agree. But that's up to the law to determine the time that they should spend. But I do think that they all need therapy. Real therapy, not tech from NXIVM. So let's get into it. I want to talk about this in a linear fashion as much as possible. There's a lot of people coming in and out of his life and then staying for 20 years and living together. And there's a lot of folks and a lot of moving parts. But in theory, there's some entities, some multi-level marketing entities throughout this whole thing. And I want to try to talk about it in a linear manner. So let's give it the college try, right? First, let's talk about how Keith became Keith. Well, according to one of his early girlfriends, his father, he was judged gifted, and his father said that it went to his head. Like at age 13, he was judged gifted, and after that, Nellie barred the door. He just thought so much of himself. So we start into this legend of Keith Raniere, and that, again, he's deemed gifted at age 13, and he was allegedly one of these top scorers on an IQ test that you actually filled out, and there's rumors that he wasn't the only one that filled out, and he worked on it for a month and then mailed it in. So I think he only missed one question or something. So he's also talked up as a scientist, and that he speaks multiple languages, and that he's created these unique tools and developed a new mathematics. By the way, my dad is a rocket scientist, and he would probably love to hear that there's a new mathematics out there. And a, quote, methodology to optimize the experience and behavior of people. So a new mathematics and a way to optimize this human experience of people. So he's a compassionate humanitarian, and he claims his goal is to build humanity, and he's ethical. Yet, you'll find that, in my opinion, all this is pure puffery. All of it. It's like this legend. And once it's told orally through, word of mouth, through the girlfriends and the different followers, it's like Charlie Manson-ish. At first, when I heard people liking him to Manson, I was like, give me a break. He's not Manson. No. Read the trial transcripts, read the exhibits, read the texting between him and his different followers. Manson. Yeah, I would never, because I know so much about Manson. I studied Manson for easily 20 years. I read all the followers' books, you know. He is very similar to Manson, so that wasn't hyperbole when people said that. The only difference is we are not aware of him ordering any murders. That's the only difference. And I say that very loosely. I'll get into that. So let's try to go linear. You get this legend going. And when you go and look at that, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, it's in New York. His GPA, you know, when he was in college, was only 2.2. And he wasn't even good at math or science. Okay? But let that sink in. This is puffery, okay? This exceptional individual, this guru-like individual, he ends up doing time in prison. That's where he is right now, along with many of his followers. 120 years is what he is doing in prison. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is some of his followers have been deemed guilty in a court of law, but they're still waiting their sentencing. So we don't know yet what sentence they're going to get, but I think we can arguably deem this a coercive cult. So let's get into it. So let's start at the beginning. Keith got his start in Amway, and I reckon that that's where he got his first taste of a multi-level marketing experience and a multi-level marketing scheme. And allegedly, he also ends up selling vitamins as well. But I think the company was called National Health Network, all right? But that actually is after he starts this consumer's byline. So he starts off in Amway. And what Amway, I don't know if you remember Amway, but they sold things, you know, and it was the multi-level marketing concept of where there's a person at the top and then you sell things, but you also recruit people. And the more people you recruit, you get like a percentage of their sales or a kick-up. You know, but in those pyramids, that's why they're outlawed, is the only people that end up making the money are the people at the top. And so in 1990, after learning some tricks in Amway, he starts a business called Consumers Byline Inc. It was a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme giving its members discounts like on hotels, on vacation packages, on groceries, and appliances. That's what he said. And so he claims to cut out the markup, the natural markup in the capitalistic system for its members for $19 a month. So you're paying $19 a month and you're hoping to get more than a $19 discount, okay? That's the concept. And there's even a commercial that they've dug up, and it's got the Green Acres Eddie Albert's like, right, Consumers Byline, you know what I mean? So he'd actually obviously paid an actor to like promote Consumers Byline. So it starts in 1990, but it closed by 1993, okay? So it didn't have a long shelf life. And it was investigated in, I think, 30 states. Some documents say 20 states. And in 1997, he was accused of operating this illegal pyramid scheme by the New York Attorney General, because that's where he was stationed. That's where he was operating out of New York. But he was also operating in different states, but he was, I guess he was incorporated. It says incorporated, but I didn't look up to see if it was actually properly incorporated. But long story short, the suit was settled without admitting any wrongdoing, but I believe he did have to pay like a fine. And he did learn about the MLM, the pyramid scheme format, the concept of that. And what he did was he goes and he founds another company called Executive Success Programs a year later. But mind you, in order to settle with the state of New York with this Consumers Byline, he was permanently banned from participating in any kind of chain distribution schemes. And so were a couple of the people that were involved in it with him. They had to sign a document that they would never do that. And he did anyway. So in 1990, he starts the Consumers Byline. He tries to scam folks, you know, as many folks as he can, in my opinion, until he gets cold busted for it. And so it stops in 1993, and by 1997, that's when he was wrapping up the legal aspects of that. Now, I think it was 1995 before he had started the National Health Net. He was selling the vitamins through the National Health Network, and I'm not sure why he stopped that. Maybe someone got a sniff of him doing the MLMs again. I'm not exactly sure. So here he is getting cold busted and told, don't do it again, and he got off easy. All right, that's what's one thing, is when you let somebody off easy. I'm not sure how much money he ended up scamming out of folks in total with Consumers Byline. But perhaps if they'd come down a little harder on him, you could say perhaps that wouldn't have happened. But he was pretty oily and snaky, and he probably would have learned something in federal prison. Anyways, let's keep going. And I'm going to start blending in some of the followers so you get an idea of who was around at what time. Karen Unterreiner, she met Keith Raniere in college. So when he was at that institute, let's call it RPI, the one that I can't pronounce. She met him in college in the 1970s, and she was his girlfriend for many years and believed that she was his only girlfriend. Now you're going to find out throughout this tale, and I'll even go back to before this, before college, that Keith has an issue with girls, in my opinion. An issue with, I'm not kink shaming anybody, but he likes to be polyamorous, but he likes young girls, In my mind, he has, I wouldn't necessarily say, okay, I have to be careful because YouTube doesn't like certain words, but I'm not saying he's a pedo, but I'm saying he's a hebo. Get it? All right, so keep that in mind. So he has a girlfriend, Karen, and they meet in college in the 1970s, and she goes along with him allegedly for many years, thinking she's his only girlfriend, until Tony Natale steps on the scene. And I believe she's married at first, but eventually she ends up with Raniere as, the main girlfriend. So that, Karen, she understands, I'm not in a monogamous relationship with this man. I thought I was. And this is the history of all these victims. You will find in many times, unless for some reason they knew that he already had another relationship, they're coming into this thinking they're the only one. And he does have an uncanny ability to keep a girl thinking that they're the only one for a really long time. And even being able to get around it when they ask what he did, did you sleep with so-and-so, or, whatever, did you have a baby with so-and-so? And he gets it, they believe him when he lies until they can't. And then they either have to cope with it or they have to leave. And most of them by that time cope with it. So in 1998, Raniere founds Executive Success Programs, otherwise known as ESP, to actualize human potential. And it's inspired by the human potential movement that was really popular in the 1990s. And so Tony Natale had been his girlfriend for 6 years. And I think it was the next year is the year she leaves him. Just to give you an idea of who was with him when and who is in. I believe that you'll find out that Karen was one of the first people in and one of the last people to leave. So if you want an overview, she's probably got the most dirt on him. So allegedly 17,000 people went through the ESP program, the Executive Success Program, over the years. 17,000. Now, that's a lot. And I'm going to introduce to you some of the followers. And the names, you'll have duplicate names. There's so many people. But keep in mind that many of these people remained with Keith or in the programs for years or for decades. And his partners, they'll overlap, and many times they're not allowed sexual relations with anyone other than Keith. Yeah, he was good at one thing. For all that puffery and talking about him in genius IQ and the multiple languages and the new mathematics and all that puffery, he was good at one thing, and that's manipulation and the ability to make people do what he wanted them to do. He was good at that. Keith is a charismatic figure. I think I will admit that he had that. I find him freaking repulsive. And you know how you have to kind of say, admit your bias? My bias is I find him absolutely repulsive. And there's something about the way his eyes are and the way he kind of, like, see, with his mouth open, like, and he stares at people when they talk, like he's like, you know what I mean? Like he's listening, and then he like questions people all the time, and like he has the answers to every single one of their problems. But what gets me, that makes me the most angry about him and the most repulsed, is reading the texts that were revealed in the criminal trial between he and different folks, and the way he manipulated them. Mental rape, mental R. Yeah, bad. This guy's repulsive. I can't stand him. So anyway, he's a charismatic figure, hadn't revealed his true face to these ladies. And then he meets Nancy Salzman, who was allegedly a nurse, and she acts like a therapist. Now, there's argument about what are her credentials, because I don't think that she was a licensed therapist. But what do I know? Maybe her license expired or something, but allegedly she was a nurse. But she comes on the scene, and Keith is making people feel needed and loved, and Nancy is using her psychology and her behavior modification. See, Nancy was into neuro-linguistic programming, otherwise known as NLP, and it's a type of hypnotherapy. And she also was a hypnotist, and she admits to this. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what I know about NLP. I mean, I have a book. I had it. We've had it probably since the 90s, I think it was called Frogs into Princes. And so I knew about NLP, and there's a lot of techniques to it, but it's a way of manipulating people and making them feel like you're on the same page with them. So one of the things that I remember about NLP is mirroring. If someone is talking like this, and you all of a sudden just kind of start mirroring their body language, and if they're, going like this, then you would also kind of like, mirror their body language, and then they start breaking down. They start opening up to you. So it's mirroring body language. It's also, you learn how the person sees the world, and a lot of times some people sense things through sound. Some people sense things through their sight. People sense things through visuals. And so once you learn somebody's strengths, like, I don't see it that way, like it's a visual person. So then you talk, everything you frame when you talk to them is like, did you see the way that person did that? And you frame everything in a visual way. All the verbs you use will be visual verbs, versus someone who responds more to hearing something. You can say, did you hear what she said? I heard all these sounds, and you frame everything that you talk to them about in sound verbs, all right? And in sound visuals. And then you relate, they'll feel like you understand them like nobody else. And there's a whole different ways of learning the way they operate, and then you mimic it. You mirror it back to them, and you talk to them the way they relate, but you're doing it in a manipulative fashion. And so, yeah. And then she's a hypnotist on top of it. So in 1980s, she's allegedly being a therapist. I don't know, maybe the state she was in didn't need it to be licensed. I don't know. But Tony Natale met Nancy Salzman because she went to Nancy Salzman for problems with Keith. Yeah, she was having problems with Keith, so she goes to Nancy. And this is what Tony says, allegedly. And that Nancy hears in their, therapy session, and she's like, oh, Nancy says, you're dealing with a sociopath, Tony. You're dealing with a sociopath. So what ends up happening is she ends up bringing in Keith, and Keith snows Nancy Salzman. And she's like, well, there's another one. See, that he was good at that. He was good at manipulating people. He manipulated the therapist. So Tony's going in there for help with her problem boyfriend, Keith. And then what happens is Keith ends up snowing her therapist, who is Nancy Salzman. And so Nancy snowed over, and they go on. Nancy and Keith go on to found this executive success program. And they create what they call tech, called rational inquiry, which is allegedly just a bunch of scientific hodgepodge, wherein they discover a person's fear and they gain their trust to fix the fear, to fix the problem. And allegedly, they use a lot of valid therapies and they just kind of put it all together. Like they'll use some good cognitive behavioral therapy. They'll use things from different cultures, like the hand clap. I thought that was like Japanese, like where you want to silence all thoughts. And so you smack your hands together really hard and fast to like center yourself. Like they took a lot of stuff and they put it all together in this hodgepodge. Even in my mind, they used some Scientology, they threw anything that they thought worked or was good for manipulation. They put it all together and they make this rational inquiry where they're discovering the subject's fears or a limiting belief, and they're gaining the person's trust, and then they're going to fix that person's problems. Further, rational inquiry was really not eligible for even patent protection, which they said that it was patented, because see, subjective inventions, they aren't something that's applicable patent material. But someone was saying it's under like, there was some part of a patent that was under like, I want to say not UFO, but like some kind of weird technology. But heck, if I knew, I didn't find that. But again, rational inquiry, stuff that's like subjective isn't patent material, but they tell everybody, it's patented, word of mouth. It's this legend that's this puffery, this legend that's passed on through the mouths of the followers through the decades and then becomes truth to them, So the curriculum of this executive success program, this rational inquiry, was supposed to boost a participant's self-esteem. If you're trying to be in the human growth potential movement, you're trying to make humanity better, to boost their self-esteem. And initially, like any good scam, it does in the beginning. It boosts your self-esteem. But then in the end, it ends up eroding your self-esteem and you become reliant on the guru or the product or whatever, right? That's the scam, is you get them hooked with something viable and then you reel them in, right? If you had to generalize and just throw a generalized blanket over all this, I would say that the executive success programs that later turned into NXIVM, the kind of folks that followed this were seemingly trying to find a purpose in their life and trying to have a certain sense of belonging. They came in there mostly with altruistic reasons, like they wanted to better themselves, they wanted to better their world, they wanted to get over some fear or something. It really wasn't after monetary gain. It wasn't after material possessions. Those kind of folks that came into this were not the kind of folks at the end of it. Like this thing changed them and not for the better. But to say that they came into it because they had like greedy motivations, no. Actually, most of them they wanted to be better people. It's just that the person that was guiding them wasn't a good person. The people that were guiding them were not good people. So Raniere meets one of his followers, Barbara Boucher. I think he meets her in 1999, so about a year after he started executive success programs. And she's taking a workshop, and I believe by like spring of 2000, she's one of his best salespeople. And she actually wasn't even that young of a woman. I believe she was in her 40s. Correct me if I'm wrong. Beautiful woman, but she was in her 40s. She wasn't his type per se, because after a while he's going to have a type. And so she was an earlier follower of his group. She ends up being his girlfriend for 9 years. Okay, so you're going to start saying, well, wait a minute, how can that person be his girlfriend for 6 years and that person be his girlfriend for 9 years? Because they're overlapping, unbeknownst to them. I'm telling you, the guy had the ability to lie to somebody's face and have them believe him. So Barbara was a self-made millionaire. She helped with the infrastructure and the early organization of the group. And she was a real asset to them. you know, because you bring your skill set with you. I hate that word, by the way, that term, skill set. But anyway, you bring your knowledge and your abilities with you, and she had a lot of them because she was already a self-made millionaire. And after a year of being on board with him, she discovers that she's not Raniere's only girlfriend, all right? And all these women are in love with his big brain. You know what I'm saying? Because I think I think that's all it was, you know? His big brain and his ability to snow people. So allegedly, Raniere had a commodities account that he put in Barbara Boucher's name. Remember this, because it ends up losing $1.6 million, right, on the commodities trading. And by April of 2009, so think about 9 years, a whole bunch of women, along with Barbara, they're known as the NXIVM 9, by the way, they confront Keith. So by 2009, she's going to be confronting Keith and resigning, all right? But think, at one point, he has lost $1.6 million that he played in the, he traded in the commodities market. So see, what happens is when she leaves the organization, she tells them, I'm leaving. She's leaving with the NXIVM. She's part of the NXIVM 9. They're leaving. And she tells the organization, you know, you owe me the money, the commodities money that Keith diddled around with and put in her name. And they responded. And also, I think there was some text. She was owed some money from them. And then what they did was they respond by claiming that she was extorting them. That she was extorting them. So, of course, lawsuits ensued. And I want you to know that Barbara Boucher, she starts about the year 2000. She leaves about 2009, give or take. She was sued after she leaves 7 times in, I don't know, like 14 courtrooms. It's ridiculous. She was sued by NXIVM and through NXIVM's associates fucking 7 times and spent $700,000 in lawyers' fees fighting and winning against them. So she ends up bringing in Mark Vicente. So I just wanted, the reason I'm telling you this, and yeah, I'm telling you a little bit in advance, is because these big time folks end up bringing in other big time folks. And that's how, say, Mark got brought in by Barbara. You know, she got the self-made millionaire, and she knows so much, and she's a great mover and a shaker, and she's able to help build up ESP that later turns into NXIVM. She's the one that brings in Mark Vicente, the filmmaker. I just want to tie that in there because I don't think they actually mention all this in the different documentaries. And I also want to note that Sarah Edmondson, who's featured in The Vow, she ends up getting a promotion after Barbara Boucher hightails it with the NXIVM 9. You following me? So there are some people that aren't in these other documentaries that, well, or aren't featured in the other documentaries, that there's a reason why certain people get advanced because other people, they leave and they end up getting sued into oblivion almost. But so in 2003, Raniere and Nancy Salzman, they rebrand Executive Success Programs to NXIVM. So it's not a different company. It's just a rebrand. And according to their own website, this is what NXIVM was. A professional business providing educational tools, coaching, and trainings to corporations and people from all walks of life. We'll give classes to people from all walks of life. We will take your money for classes, right? Yeah. And also from their website, that this group allows humanity to rise to its noble possibility. So altruistic. Working to build a better world. Right? Sounds so helpful, so altruistic in what humanity needs, right? This group, at this point, NXIVM, is headquartered in Albany, New York. However, it ended up having centers in many places, like Canada, like Central America, and Mexico. And Mexico is going to feature heavily in this story, and the Mexican members as well. I'm just trying to set up the early years and some of the earliest followers. There are a lot more. I'm going to get into them, all right? But they deserve their own section, I do believe. They deserve their own episodes. Well, let's just talk about what's culty about NXIVM. All right? What's culty? Was this a system for personal development, a system like Tony Robbins, or was it something more sinister? So let me lay out what I thought by watching all this and by gathering all the information, what I thought was culty. And this is a long list, so buckle in. Get a drink. Okay. Special handshakes. They have special handshakes. All right? You've got titles for certain important people. Keith's the Vanguard. Nancy's the Prefect. All right? And Vanguard, by the way, came from a video game. Chanting. They were doing some chanting and some rah-rah stuff. Very culty. All right? Bowing. Okay? Giving that tribute of bowing. Culty. Now, does any of these alone make a cult? No. I'm building it. I'm going to build it for you. The focus hand slap. Hand clap. That, you know, like you come in and you slap. Culty. Not always. Like, let's say, I think the Japanese use it to stop a bad thought. Like you're having a bad thought and you're like, stop it. And you just do that hand clap really vigorously to stop your brain from that. But when you're doing it in a different format all the time, culty. Special sashes that display the ranking system, that you move up the ranks. It's called the stripe path. I'll get into that. Culty, all right? The group has its own lingo. Nothing says cult like having your own damn lingo, okay? You got Scientology-like terms like parasite, suppressive person, or suppressive. There's also some more that they have called like at cause. I'll explain these in another video. So your own lingo. They use hypnosis. They say, Salzman says, you know, I used to be a hypnotist. Hypnosis, unbeknownst to the members. Culty. Culty, culty, culty. And subliminal suggestion. Culty. The group is an echo chamber. Culty. What's more culty than everybody echoing each other's thoughts and building up a rapport that involves an echo chamber? Removing the autonomy of a person. You know, if you have a certain thought that doesn't fit in with the echo chamber, then it's dealt with. It's shunned or it's questioned. You got to get some EMs for it. Okay, that's 10. Their way is the way. Culty. Some are made to sign non-disclosure agreements. Culty. You know what I'm saying? Like non-disclosure agreements. What is this? Is this top secret? Are you working for the government? Are you working for something that's like, that's special that you need to sign a non-disclosure agreement? Yeah. Not supposed to use any other therapy. Our way is the way, use another therapy, that's bad. Culty. An MLM with people as the product. Human resources, right? Sounds pretty dirty to me. So an MLM with people as the product, also a Ponzi scheme, in the sense that if you recruit, say like you can't afford that first intro class, if you recruit 3 people, then that'll take care of that $5,000 or whatever for that class. That's a Ponzi scheme. So you can get your money back with the class you took by recruiting people. That's Ponzi. That's also culty. All right? In my opinion, by the way, all this classes cost money, with many members in debt to the cult up to $5,000 for a 5-day workshop. Classes, quote, are called intensives, can consist of 5 up to 16 consecutive days, 14-hour days. So these intensive, they allow no time for you to reflect because you're spending so much time in these classes getting brainwashed. Culty! Are we at 15? Okay, let's keep going. Classes are considered investments. No, investments are investments. Culty. I mean, I don't want to be materialistic because investments could be learning a foreign language. That's an investment for your mind. Investments could be spending special time with people. Investments don't have to be materialistic, but investments are not necessarily taking these kind of classes, in my opinion. Members encouraged to continue up the stripe path, spending money on classes, EMings. It's kind of like therapy, but it's a therapy in order to get rid of a natural impulse. Classes put many in debt, putting money on a credit card, or you could work out your debt by, offsetting your debt by doing, Housework for some of the followers, being somebody's assistant. Culty. Did I put up another finger or not? You know, let's give it another finger. So here's the path, by the way. You've got the student as the first. The next rank is a coach. The next rank's a proctor. The next rank's a senior proctor. Next rank's a counselor. Next rank's a senior counselor. Then you have the prefect, which is Nancy, and the vanguard, which is Keith. So that's the path. So you're encouraged to go up the stripe path. Culty. All right. Members to overcome their own body feelings and sensations. Culty. Your body is giving you feelings and sensations for a reason. You're not supposed to ignore them. Taught to distrust their gut or natural feelings. Culty. Again, same reason I gave in the last one. Okay, now we're in the 20s. 21. Members to function on less sleep. You're not supposed to you don't really need 8-9 hours of sleep. Guys, you think you only need 7. You think you only need 5. Raniere would sleep in the daytime while others worked, and he would walk at night, and he picked different people to walk with him in the wee hours so that many end up sleep deprived. And we're also going to get into the readiness drills. But yeah, culty. You don't need all that sleep. You're just laying around and indulging yourself. Bad. Members don't need as much food. Again, classic cult. You get people malnourished, you get people sleep deprived, and they're easier to manipulate. Other people giving the feedbacks and opinions. So you parrot the guru. You're in an echo chamber, and people are parroting the guru, and they're giving you feedback on your behavior and thoughts. Raniere taping everything like his words and actions are so damn important. You know? Who does that remind you of? I could say another group that's a cult. Yeah. Like your stuff's also, like everything that comes out of your mouth is worthy of being like hammered into brass or bronze and you know, come on now. Give me a break. Oh, God. Authoritarian leader, guru, culty. We're at 26 now. Raniere tells individuals on the side, you're the smartest. You get me. You know, you're the one that gets me. You're the one that understands me. I keep you around because you're the best. You could replace me. So their vanity or not narcissism of the victim, of the follower, hooks them in. But he uses this technique on almost everybody. Culty. The guru puts on a pretense of celibacy. Yeah. He was celibate. He's the guru. He's holding himself back for everybody else. And he's celibate. The women Raniere closely mentoring knew that he was not celibate. I'm sure his own child probably knew he wasn't celibate, right? But many believe that he was. So, meanwhile, he's rotating a group of women, approximately, consistently 12 to 20 women at a time, rotating them around through his life. But meanwhile, being touted as being celibate. He probably has really big cha-chas. You know what I mean? He's got big gonads or something, you know. Oh, they're also celebrating the guru's birthday. And it's not good enough to have like a normal one-day birthday. It turns into Vanguard Week, and it's in August, and they would pay $2,000 to attend his big birthday bash. Vanguard Week. What's the word? You got it. All right. Moving to a compound in Albany. Now, granted, it wasn't just one house. They would have a main house with many women in it, but there was a multiple. They just like all wanted to center in one area, and if you tried to move out of the area, then that was discouraged. So Albany, New York, the inner circle all needed to be around guru. All right. So quitting or leaving NXIVM, God forfend, resulted in shaming, shunning, or vexatious litigation. Culty. So we're at 30, right? This is just things I noticed, all right? And I'm no specialist. Collecting collateral or blackmail against the members' followers. And this happens in the DOS part under the umbrella of NXIVM. So we're at 31 now. Is that enough? Are you feeling maybe this is a little bit culty? Okay, let me just tell you a little bit more. So in NXIVM, and probably in ESP as well, when people first came onto the scene, someone that's just going to take a class, in many instances, in the first classes, you'll have applications and you'll have questionnaires, and they elicit personal information about a subject, a person. And when an entity or a group or guru learns a lot of information about a person, like their emotional triggers, what they like, what they dislike, what they're terrified of, their fears, their anxieties, their Achilles heels, that person just immediately becomes easily manipulated. Their ability to be manipulated is just like shooting fish in a barrel. So prospective followers are filling out these quote-unquote personal emotions inventories and other information gathering paperwork. So in essence, the group is getting all this information, all this data about a person, and it puts them and giving them the upper hand over a person right away, and the person's just thinking that they're getting like help or some kind of guidance, like therapy. There's a reason that therapists are supposed to be licensed, and that there's HIPAA and things like that, so that when you go in for help, it's all confidential and you can leave whenever you want, and that person is under guidelines from a state, agency. And they're supposed to be gone to school to learn the techniques and to keep their memberships and their accreditation, up to date, and not to do experiments on people. And it seems to me, in my opinion, a lot of this, it's verged into that. Not only through, in my opinion, Nancy Salzman, but people act like she was the only one that was doing it. She had taught the tech to a lot of folks that were doing the same kind of stuff. And it's manipulation. It's brainwashing, in my opinion. So they have this thing called EMs. It's called exploration of meaning. And just like anything in other groups that you've probably watched, I'm not going to say the name of the group, but you can have some kind of therapies that work. And then people, they get high off of it because it fixed their problem. Like they had somebody else come in and look at a situation of something that upset them, and they give you a solution, or they help you find the solution within yourself. And so that person then becomes invested in this whole program. But then by the time they're halfway down the road, they're too deep in it to turn around and run away, or too collateralized to run away. So let's talk a little bit about their tech as I know it, as in my opinion of what I can compare it to. They have something called EM, exploration of meaning. And I could liken it sometimes to like a cognitive behavioral session therapy, but their version of it, their bastardized version of it. And let's say you're having, like in one of the documentaries, they were saying like, oh, I was going over the bridge and I was having panic attacks. And I don't understand why I was having panic attacks. And so they sit down with someone and they talk about it. And they'll say, okay, when was the first time you ever felt that panic? And you go back into your history and your psyche and try to figure out the first time you felt that. And they'll be like, oh, now why did that happen? Let's say that you remember that your grandpa committed suicide by jumping off a bridge. And you had totally forgotten about it, right? And that you weren't afraid of heights, but that's why. And it gave you a feeling of anxiety because you didn't know how grandma was going to continue after grandpa died. And that was the first time you got anxious like that. And you just forgot that the bridge was a symbol of something that made you really anxious. And so in your mind, you linked the bridge to those feelings of being out of control and worrying about grandma. And then in your adult life, you're going over bridges and you're having anxiety. And then when they tie it back together of your unresolved feelings about grandma and grandpa and that you tied the bridge to that, then it goes away. So, but that's valid. That would be like a cognitive behavioral therapy, and then working through about what's coming up in your mind, and then how you challenge that. So they use some techniques that work, and then you get somebody hooked because maybe it helps them. Maybe the next time they go over the bridge, they're not freaking out. So anyway, once you learn this tech from them, these different ways of helping people, you can be an independent practitioner. So what these people are doing is they're trying to not only, it's like going to therapy, but then all of a sudden you want to be the therapist. And so they want to help other people because it's really just that easy, right? You don't have to go through all these years and years and years of schooling, right? So, but they also decide who to promote and who not to promote. You know, so you end up taking all these classes so you can become an independent practitioner, and it's all very new agey, and it's like create your own reality, and it's always telling you that nobody's a victim. But in a way, if you tell somebody nobody's a victim, someone can victimize you and you have to take it. So that's one other thing about this group that you have to keep in mind, is that they have this mantra that nobody is a victim. And sometimes people can actually be victimized, but you have to like take it. And it's destructive in my opinion. So the government also found that some of these followers participated in illegal experimentation. No shocker, right here. Just let me give you one example. 40 members participated in a human Fright experiment wherein EEG, that's electrodes, were placed on the participants' heads, not in their heads, but on their heads in a cap. And they were subjected to scenes on video that they couldn't turn away from of increasing graphic violence, literal beheadings. And I'm thinking like Faces of Death, if you want to try to get an idea. And they were forced to watch it, and they're being filmed having reactions. And the last scene was of a drug cartel beheading women. And then, as if this wasn't bad enough to be like experimented on in this way and not be able just to leave, Keith Raniere is asking, you know, what's it like to be the executioner? Like, you have to sit there and then go through this of like, what the F? What the F is this dude doing? This is not helping anybody for anything. This is just weird. And the government did find that that was an illegal experimentation. Oh gosh. I'm trying to keep this in a linear fashion. This is very hard. So regarding this being a cult, which I in my opinion, believe and purport to you that this is a cult. So Raniere allegedly told filmmaker Mark Vicente himself, he told them that he didn't necessarily feel that cult stuff was bad. Of course you don't, because you have one, right? And he asked Vicente, who was worried about the bad press, are you scared of people being brainwashed? That's paraphrased. And Raniere said to Vicente that he didn't want skeptical people in the group. He didn't want a skeptic. That's not the kind of person he wanted. Raniere is heard saying through audio and on video, motivating mules is to set up circumstances, and sometimes they go too far, and that's fine. Motivating mules. He viewed folks as mules. He viewed this as almost like a game where he's the head. He's like a god, and he's just manipulating everyone. And so that's kind of how we start off, where Keith starts off, he's with Amway, and then he goes to, and he founds ESP, and then it changes into NXIVM, and it's a company that's like an umbrella, and it has all these affiliated programs underneath it. And in the next series, I'm going to talk about all the different affiliated programs under NXIVM. I'm also going to start and to talk about the different folks that were involved throughout his life. And we'll go back to the beginning. There's some shady stuff. There's some shady deaths, in my opinion, that I believe they should be looked at. Now, will they be looked at? We don't know, because he's in jail already for 120 years. So unless there is proof, or unless that there are other people that are willing to admit that were around him about these other shady deaths, we'll never know. But in my opinion, had he not gotten 120 years, I think that very well some different states could look into some of the suspicious deaths that are surrounding some of the group. So anyway, I hope you found this interesting. I understand it was hard to follow because this whole thing is hard to follow. The timeline is hard, and there's a lot of people that come in and out, and I'm going to try to give you as much information that maybe the documentaries didn't give you, because they were generally coming from their own perspective, and they didn't have a wider perspective on it. So I hope you found this informative, and if you did, please hit the like and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be notified of the next upload. Without further ado, have an excellent day.